What is going on, everybody? Welcome in. We are back. It's been a little while. We are back breaking down college football. Favorite thing to do here. I'm going to be breaking down the championship week kickoff. We have 8 games here. I know I missed the last couple of weeks. Like I said, been very busy this year. One-man show. I'll pump out what I can. And this week I can do a breakdown, so I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, it's a great slate to watch from a fan perspective. It seems kind of binary from a DFS perspective. You have a few games in the 70s that are pretty obvious that everyone's going to be stacking. You have a few games in the 50s, a few in the 40s, and then obviously Michigan, Iowa are playing, so yuck. So yeah, let's get straight to it. Baylor, Oklahoma State, one of the lowest totals on the slate. It's at 46.5. Baylor is plus 5.5 here. These two teams did already play. It was very low scoring. It was a 24-14 win for Oklahoma State. I like Oklahoma State. I think they'll probably win again. I think it's going to look pretty similar to the last game. But that's not guaranteed. Baylor's very well coached under Dave Miranda. So we will see. But yeah, Oklahoma State's defense is nasty. They have the third best scoring defense in the country. Extremely good against the run. They shut down Baylor's run the first time they played. I would imagine they're going to do pretty well here. And don't let it fool you. That Oklahoma game was pretty high scoring, but they had a lot of short fields. There was a lot of wonky special team stuff that happened, and they just made some good plays. Caleb Williams did impress me. He made some good plays that game. So anyway, news with Jerry Bohannon, starting quarterback for Baylor, 6.2K. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. Didn't play last week. They said he was going to. He was warming up. So some people had him in some lineups. I threw him in some FanDuel lineups to try to get some leverage at the last minute. Then he didn't play, so that was awesome. Even if he does play at 6.2K against a very good defense with a hamstring issue when he's a dual threat guy, it doesn't really spell all that great, but he's really cheap. This is probably the cheapest he's been all year, so if he does play, I guess you could throw him in a few lineups if you're doing 150, but nothing really interesting. Blake Shapen, he's a freshman at 6.1K. He filled in, did pretty well against Texas Tech, but that's Texas Tech, and he's not playing Texas Tech here, folks. So not much interest on the Baylor side. If you're going to look at a wide receiver, Tyquan Thornton's been pretty clearly the number one guy at 5.7K. Not anything overly special as a player. But he's pretty clearly their alpha when you look at the target share. He's pretty high up there. Other than that, it's RJ Sneed at 4K. I don't really see how you can get there. I think there's some better options. Ben Sims and plays every week, the tight end at 3.6K. He's just too cheap. He did catch a touchdown last week, but didn't really have much of a ceiling. I think here in a game where they could struggle to generate traditional offense, which they did the first time, maybe they start dumping it off to Ben Sims a little bit more, and I think that would be a wise option. So secondary plays, if anything, there. Running back room, it's all Abram Smith. This guy's a beast, an absolute monster. If you haven't watched him run, please watch this game. It's going to be a great matchup. Baylor does have a good offensive line, and obviously Oklahoma State's very solid defensively. Don't really have many NFL guys, or at least high draft picks, but they just play great team defense and really fly the football. It's going to be fun to watch. But yeah, Abram Smith, former linebacker, just runs everybody over. 6.8K, this is a tough matchup. At least you know the volume's going to be secured. It's kind of the same for both running backs in this matchup. His volume has been pretty steady, over 20 carries. We can pretty much expect that. Even last week, he didn't have a great game, 3.9 yards per carry, but he still found that touchdown for you and got almost 25 fantasy points. So his last time out against Oklahoma State, one of the worst games of the season. But I think in cash games with that workload, you can expect that. And in tournaments, he probably won't be super high owned, and you could get 25 carries, maybe a touchdown. Tristan Ebner behind him, good player. His price has just steadily gone up. There were a few weeks where he had him, he was almost near min price. He was he was 3.7K, something like that for a while. Let's check it to make sure I'm not off. Yeah, he was around 4K. Okay, yeah, I guess I'm misremembering things. Happens quite frequently. But yeah, 5.3K, I'm not really sure you have any interest there. All right, as far as Oklahoma State, not a ton of interest here. Kind of the same story. Maybe a one-off for both these teams. Spencer Sanders at 7.2K. He is a dual threat. The Baylor defense, their scoring defense numbers look a lot better than the yardage numbers. They're giving up about 5.5 yards per play, which is not something I expected to see when I looked at their numbers. So I think they may be more exploitable than we've seen. And Oklahoma State's offense is really rolling after struggling for much of the year. They're averaging 40 points per game in their last 5 games with 450 yards per game. So something might be taking off, but there are some pretty clear quarterbacks you're going to get to unless you're going for leverage. I don't see it. Tay Martin at 7.3K. He does have 41 targets in his last 4 games. He is pretty clearly the number one option. I think he's fine on this slate. I think you're probably going to want to get the expensive quarterbacks. But if you want to probably be a little bit different, you can go to Tay Martin. Brandon Presley at 5.2K. This kid is absolutely awesome if you haven't seen him play football. Please watch this game. It's going to be a good game. Watch this game. The target share is not really there. They don't throw to him a ton. He's pretty clearly the number 2 option, however, behind him. Other than that, Blaine Green, I think at 3.5K, you could consider for the pay down option. There's no fantastic pay down option, but there's a few you could consider. There's about 5 I would consider. Blaine Green's one of them. Freshman, he looks pretty good. He's getting a handful of targets, a handful of catches every game. He's really stepped in, and some of their other options went out due to injury. And he's even filling in a little bit at tight end, I saw, because they've had some tight end injuries, and he's a pretty big kid. I think he's about 220, 216, somewhere around there, and he's been filling at the tight end position, which in this offense, not doing a whole lot of blocking anyway. But yeah, he's going to be on the field at 3.5K. All right, as far as running backs go, Jalen Warren at 6.6K. It's the same thing with Abram Smith. He's going to get great volume. He probably won't be super efficient with it, but with that volume and with touchdown upside, I don't hate it. Probably more in cash games. I don't hate it. I'm not really a huge advocate for it. If you go through the game log, you'll see he had about 30 points against Baylor the first time out. I think that was a little bit of an anomaly because Baylor does have the second best rushing defense in the Big 12. But you could point to that recent history. So I think he's fine. Anyone behind him did not see carries. All right, next game, Kent State versus NIU. This is going to be one of the ones where there's a whole lot of ownership interest, and for good reason. Over-under's at 74.5. It's going up. Opened at 73.5. Kent State was minus 2.5 favorites when first I checked, and now they're up to minus 3.5. Long story short, I kind of like Kent State in this ballgame. I'm not a huge believer in any team. I think it's kind of a toss-up, but NIU's, they just, if there's ever been a fraudulent statistical profile, it's NIU. Not to call them frauds. I like them. I've bet them in spots. They were winless a year ago. They're trying to be the first team ever in college football history. At least I think so. That's what I saw. That's what I believe. I couldn't verify otherwise. To go winless one season and then win the conference championship the next. So I think I'm going to be rooting for them, but I can't expect them to win this ball game. They don't really appear to be good at anything except running the football, which kudos to you for running the football in 2021. But that seems about it. This is going to be played at Ford Field. It's going to be inside a dome. I think this all sets up for offense. They played about a month ago, and the score was 52-47, combined for about 100 points. I like points here. I think there's some great spots. I think I'm mostly going to be looking at Kent State in this matchup. Against NIU. And NIU's defense, they can't stop the run at all. And Dustin Crum is a veteran quarterback in a conference championship game who's going to run the ball a lot and who has been throwing the ball decently at 8.3K. I think he's going to be highly owned. I think it's hard not to get there. You have the Wake and the Pitt quarterbacks at 9.5K and above. And Dustin Crum is just about the same upside, just about the same floor. Maybe a better floor because of his rushing, and he's cheaper. So I think Dustin Crum is probably the top quarterback option on the slate, but that's probably not telling you anything you don't already know. As far as the stacking option, Dante Cephas is the guy. Him, Abram, and Polk. So Abram's at 5.4K, Polk's at 3.8K. They all have between 20 and 30 targets in their last 4 games. It was a little bit more spread out than I thought originally, so I thought Cephas was going to have more of a target share than that. That being said, he is the alpha. He's a little bit volatile, as you can see there, but he's had over 20 points in 5 of his last 6 games. 5 of his last 6 games, had a 50 burger in there. He's the guy to go to in the red zone. He's the most targets. Cephas is fantastic. Like I said, it's hard to get to those top wide receiver options, but Cephas is certainly one of them. Abram at 5.4K, I think his price is justified. Pokes, I think, a little bit too cheap, 4.1K. And then you had Nykeem Johnson, who's been all over the place. He's had some really good games, had some good stretches, was playing him at points after he had that stretch of double-digit scores in at least 4 straight games. And then he's really come back down to earth. Had 0 points against Akron, had 3.7 against Miami, Ohio. The targets really have not been there. Could they be there now? They could be. I think he's a decent option at 4.1K, but it's just totally volatile. GPPs only. Running back room, I think Marcus Cooper, probably one of my top running backs on the slate. As you can tell, I'm just going to have a lot of Kent State. It's hard not to. Him and Crum. Their first 1,000-yard rusher since 2012. This guy's been an absolute monster. Usually they split up the workload between their running backs, but he's pretty clearly taken the number 1 reins. Has 20 carries in each of his last 4 games against a terrible Northern Illinois defense that's given up 220 yards rushing or more in 4 straight. I like Marcus Cooper. Behind him, you have Xavier Williams, who did have 168 yards last week. That was kind of a blow-up performance. He's been really hit or miss, GPP only. You don't really know what kind of yardage he's going to get, but where I think they're going to score a lot of points and have a lot of success on the ground, if you really want to pay down at running back, I think Xavier Williams could be in the player pool. All right, Northern Illinois. Rocky Lombardi threw for over 500 yards last time these two teams played. I think that's an anomaly. While Kent State's defense is not good, and their passing defense in particular is really not good, they did fire their defensive coordinator after that game. I think they looked a little better. They did give up 47 points to Miami, Ohio in a game that did go to overtime last week, but long story short, they can't be worse than they were last time out. Rocky Lombardi, that was a total outlier performance. He's only thrown for over 300 yards in 2 games this year. That was one of them, and he had 500-something yards, 532 I believe he had. So it's a good matchup at 7.5K if you are paying down. I think he's probably going to be popular because there's a huge total. I wouldn't talk you off of it. He does run a little bit. But like I said, expecting that 500 yards, pretty clearly it was an outlier performance. But great matchup, runs a little bit, high total, competitive line on the game. I wouldn't talk you off of it. They held him out last week. Pretty clear to me that was just because that game didn't matter. They'd already clinched a spot in the conference championship game. They said it was from an injury he sustained in the Kent State game, which was a couple weeks away at that point. So it looks like they were just holding him out for health reasons. All right, Trayvon Rudolph, the freshman at 6.9K. This guy dropped a 50 burger last time he played Kent State. So, yeah, he's going to be in the player pool. I think he probably has the best price point of any wide receiver on the slate at 6.9K. He did nothing last week, but that's because they had a quarterback in there that couldn't throw the ball, and they didn't seem interested in throwing the ball with Lombardi out. I like him. I like his over 5 receptions on PrizePicks, which I will talk about. I think he's pretty safe, and I think he has a high upside. I really love Rudolph, especially with Kent State. If you're going to be playing Kent State like me, I think Rudolph's probably the number one bring back option on the other side. Cole Tucker didn't play last week. Him, I have not been able to see a lot of information on at 5K. He's been really underpriced since Tyrese Ritchie's been out with injury. But he didn't play last week. I haven't been able to confirm his injury status, so if something comes out that is not available yet or I haven't seen, because I did look, but sometimes it's just not out on Wednesday when I'm doing this research. I think Cole Tucker, if he does play at 5K, he's a very good option. You could consider playing him instead of Rudolph or both of them. You could stack him with Lombardi. Great options. Tyrese Ritchie at 4.2K. Yeah, if he plays, you got to have him. He was the number one option. Then he went out hurt. I would assume he's not going to play, but not a lot of reporting on that one. Anyone behind them, I am not interested in. All right, Jay Ducker. Jay Ducker was the bell cow back for a little while. They've had a ton of injuries in the running back room. And it was Jay Ducker, and then he kind of tailed off. So he had 13 carries last week, and you're probably saying to yourself, well, he still had 100 yards, and you just told us they didn't care about that game because they'd already secured the conference championship. That's all true. However, if you watch the Buffalo game the week before, it was pretty clear that Jay Ducker should have been losing his job. He managed 54 yards on 21 carries, while the two backs behind him both they were averaging like 10 yards a carry. I'm not exaggerating. And they won that game in overtime because they stopped giving Jay Ducker the ball finally. I think he probably should be losing his job. It's not clear whether or not he is. I think he's going to get a decent amount of carries and has a very good matchup. So Jay Ducker could be in the player pool if you're playing 150. Certainly is. If you're playing a single entry, I don't think you need to get there. Clint Rakovich, going to be one of the most difficult players to call on the slate at 4.6K. Again, he's been absolutely killing it. 24 yards per carry last week, 6.8 before that with 2 touchdowns. Does have double-digit points in 4 straight contests, over 15 points. In each of those at 4.6K if you're paying down. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if he got the bulk of the carries in this one. They are still going to give Ontario Brown carries at 4.2K. He's extremely electric. Again, he looks like he should be getting more carries, but he's just not. Been extremely productive when he is getting carries. Look at that, 8 carries in his last 2 games. Had 140 yards combined and 3 touchdowns. In an environment like this, I won't talk you off any of these running backs, but just know the usage is very dicey. Tournament plays only, probably. All right, Utah State, San Diego State. Over-unders at 50.5, which does seem high for a San Diego State game because they have no offense and have a great defense. 9th best scoring defense nationally. They just want to make games ugly, so that means this game's going to be ugly from a DFS perspective as well. I never play them as a favorite of over a field goal, so they're -6 currently. Not necessarily saying that makes me play Utah State. It just means San Diego State doesn't usually blow teams out. They're almost always very close. They only have a 0.5 yards per play differential on the season, which is kind of crazy considering they're 11-1, but somehow they've managed to do that. All right, Logan Bonner. I love Logan Bonner. I love this offense. I think what Blake Anderson's doing, bringing him in from Arkansas State, is absolutely fantastic. He seems to be playing through something injured, so I'll probably have this wrong, but I was watching the Wyoming game because I had his over in passing yardage. We had all the other, right? He hits it every single game. We play him every single week at PrizePicks. And he didn't hit it that week because, 1, Wyoming has a good passing defense, 2, because he completed less than 50% of his passes, but 3, because he couldn't walk. And the announcers said something about, I believe it was his ankle, like, well, it's not broken, but it's partially broken. They were saying something along those lines. So he's really, really banged up. But he's been pretty damn good regardless of that this year at 7.9K. That's probably too expensive. He'll probably be super low owned. It is a tough matchup against San Diego State, but what I will say is I think San Diego State does kind of have a cornerback problem. They're great against the run, but they've been really exposed by the pass. Fresno and Nevada both threw for over 300 yards against them. So the 2 times they placed good passing offenses, they gave up 300 yards. Utah State's good passing offense. We know they want to pass the ball. I think they couldn't get to 300 yards. I would kind of expect them to in this matchup, which might sound crazy, but once you look into it, it really doesn't seem crazy. And UNLV also torched them for well over 300 yards, and UNLV can't throw the ball, so kind of alarming. Maybe they fixed those holes in the secondary, but every time they've been tested, they haven't done well. So yeah, I like Bonner. Devin Tompkins has been one of the, well, I like him, but I don't know if I love the price. They're right. He's like right at Crumb's price. I would take Crumb 9 times out of 10. Devin Tompkins at 7.4K. He's been a monster all year. He's a deep threat. That's kind of where San Diego State's been vulnerable to the deep ball. Again, you would think they would scheme against that, put a safety over the top. They seem to scheme against that better against Boise State. But I think Utah State has a better passing offense than Boise State. I think it's pretty clear. I really do. So yeah, Devin Tompkins 7.4K. Again, it's hard to get there with the wide receivers, but he's totally fine. Derek Wright and Brandon Bowling are probably the 2 main options behind them. Wright's pretty clear the number 2 guy at 6K. That's a little expensive for me, but he could go off, like I said. And then Bowling and McGriff are also on the field quite a lot. Bowling's been a lot more consistent at 4.4K, at 4.8K from a DFS perspective. McGriff at 3.5K. I think he's one of those lower priced options you have to consider. Extremely volatile. Really has not done much with his chances. Only has 2 catches in the last 2 games, but he's had some decent games before that. And if they do put safeties over the top of Tompkins, right, if they do try to shut down Wright as well, that could open up something for guys like Bowling and McGriff. So secondary options. Do not play Utah State's running backs against San Diego State. San Diego State is amazing defensively. They've allowed over 100 yards rushing only 3 times all season. So unless you're trying to get lucky or get leverage, I wouldn't do it. All right, so Jordan Brookshire came in for relief of Lucas Johnson. They said it was for injury. Watching the broadcast, said it was for injury, but Lucas Johnson was not being very effective. They brought in Jordan Brookshire. The score was 16-3 against Boise. It looked like they were toast, and they scored 24 straight points, won 27-16. At 5.9K, he does run a little bit. Utah State's defense is not good. I actually don't hate a Jordan Brookshire play this week. Sounds crazy. He probably won't throw the ball very much. But I don't hate it. It's just he's way too cheap and he's a dual threat. Bad defense. There's a reason the over-under's 50, even though it's only 50.5. That's still high for San Diego State games because Utah State doesn't play very good defense. Stacking options, I think you're probably crazy if you're stacking him. I don't really see what you would be saving up for there. Like, you'd play Brookshire as the price saver, not necessarily a receiver. Bellinger, the tight end's on the field. Other than that, Matthews is their top guy at 6.3K, but that seems too high price for somebody in this offense. Terrell Shavers is a Alabama transfer to, where was he last? Mississippi State transfer to San Diego State. He's been in quite some different offenses at 3.3. He is talented. He could catch a touchdown, but probably a dart throw. All right, the running back. Greg Bell has a fantastic matchup this week. He only has one 100-yard rushing game since week 6, which is really concerning. Again, this offense has not been good, but he has a great matchup. Utah State's ranked 86th defending the run. Not very good. 6-point favorites. I don't hate it. Greg Bell at 5.2, I definitely think that's too cheap. Again, you don't want to overload that game, but I think you have some sneaky spots. I think a lot of people will be scared away at San Diego State, and I admit, they have a great defense, but they've been exposed in the past. It's not like they're Georgia. All right. App State versus Louisiana. A rematch here. So last time they played, I correctly called Louisiana win the game. But I think it was a little lucky, to be honest with you. So they won 41-13. They totally dominated them through the air. However, when you look at all their team's performances after that, when you factor everything in, it just doesn't seem like a repeat of that performance is likely. Billy Napier's taking the Florida job, and he's still coaching this game, so he's going to be a lame duck. Yeah, I'm not assuming the same outcome. I actually kind of like App State, which doesn't really seem to make sense, but I do. Closely lined game, over-unders at 53. No bets for me in this one. Chase Bryce, Duke transfer at 6.6K. He's just kind of a guy on the slate. He'll be low-owned. He could get you 20 points. I don't really see why not, but nothing great to point for, honestly. Thomas Hennigan, wide receiver at 5.6K. Why is he priced over Corey Sutton? I don't really know. I think it's because Hennigan's had 4 touchdowns in his last 4 games, which is impressive, but can you expect that to continue? I don't really know. I still think Corey Sutton's the top guy when you look at a usage standpoint at 4.9K. I think that price is too cheap. I think Hennigan's too cheap. I also think Malik Williams at 4.3K. I just think they're too cheap. I'm not saying they're fantastic options. I don't really love stacking them, but I think if you play one of these guys as a lineup filler, I really don't hate it at all. Malik Williams, 4.3K. He's had some big games this year, but he's also had some total duds. He's really hit or miss. It's really hard to call his usage. I'm not going to pretend like I know if he's going to go off in this game, but he could at 4.3K. That's not a terrible option. I don't think any of those guys are. I think Sutton's probably my favorite price-adjusted play of the wide receivers. The running backs, they're also too cheap. Like, I don't know why they're pricing App State like they're playing Georgia. I guess it's because they scored 13 points in their last matchup. Sure. I guess that makes sense. Nate Noel, running back, really seems to kind of have taken over as not the clear cut, seems to have taken over as the slight running back 1A on this team at 4.7K. He's way more likely to get you a 100-yard bonus, more likely to get you a little bit of receiving work, although not a lot. At 4.7K, I do think he's too cheap. App State has ran the ball well for, it seems like, a decade. But I think Cam Peoples being cheaper than him at 4K, I think Cam Peoples is just way too cheap. I think he's one of the better price-adjusted options. GPP only, he's extremely volatile. He seems to kind of be in the doghouse with the coaching staff, but you can see right there the usage, the carries are kind of on par with Noel, even though they've lagged a little bit behind. He still should be expected, in my opinion, to get the goal line work. Has 13 touchdowns this season. He's had some monster games before. At 4K, that's way too cheap. You're probably banking on touchdowns, which is not something you love to do, but maybe more on FanDuel, and especially here with the cheap pricing on DK. I definitely don't hate it. Harrington at 3.8K also gets carries, but hasn't done anything this year. So, all right, Louisiana. Levi Lewis, one of the more difficult quarterbacks to tell what he's going to do in the country. I think that performance was an anomaly first time out. App State's passing defense started the year very poor. They've really come on stronger towards the end of the year, and that's really what we've been able to expect over the last couple of years. So I'd expect this is pretty decent defense. They've allowed 7 points or fewer in 3 straight games. Only 31 points total allowed in the last 4 games. And you can't really rely on Louisiana's passing game. So I don't really have anything positive to say about their wide receivers or playing Levi Lewis. I wouldn't recommend it. If you're saying, hey, he torched him the first time, maybe you'll torch him again, you could, but I'm not using that logic here. The wide receivers, they totally spread it out. Their top receiver is Kyron Lacey, and he has 1 reception in each of his last 4 games. Not something you can bank on. They also divvy up the running back usage. So in this matchup, you have 6 total running backs at least that are going to get multiple carries. Chris Smith at 5.9K, he's the number 1 guy. He's pretty volatile. I don't love the matchup. I think the pricing is fair. Monty Bailey at 4.9K, if he was a little bit cheaper, I'd probably get there. Has 26 total carries in his last 2 games, double digits in 4 of his last 5. I think he might be the most talented running back in this room, but the usage is everywhere. Montrell Johnson is a touchdown monster at 4.4K. He's had a few monster games, but just doesn't really get that much usage. So again, could he score 2 touchdowns? He could at 4.4K. It's really a dart throw. It really is. It really is. I'm not going to overcomplicate it. It's a dart throw. Play who you want. Montrell Johnson is huge. He could get touchdowns. Imani Bailey is very talented. He could get 100 yards. Chris Smith could get 100 yards. But I don't think any of those are extremely likely outcomes. All right, Georgia versus Bama. So you know what it is with these teams by now. I kind of like when these teams everyone knows on the slate because they don't really have to repeat stuff too much because everyone knows. Stetson Bennett, 7.3K. He's been very, very efficient, and Alabama's secondary has been pretty darn bad. I think they probably are going to score some points through the air. I'd be surprised if they didn't. But it's Stetson Bennett. He throws the ball about 20 times a game. It's not really something you're looking for in your DFS quarterback. Runs a little bit, I guess, but against this defensive line, I wouldn't bank on that. So yeah, play Stetson Bennett championship week if you want. You could get crazy. Georgia's favored by 6.5 points. I think that's fair. If anyone, I would bet Georgia. They've just been dominant. Over-unders at 50.5. All right, Brock Bowers, yeah, he's just been priced really high. If he was cheaper, sometimes you get a nice price discount on these tight ends. But they've been all over Brock Bowers. He's been hit or miss. Alabama's given up some good yardage to tight ends in the past, it seems like, when they face good tight ends. Kind of seems to be the scheme. So I think Bowers probably has a good game. I'm going to take his over 44.5 on PrizePicks. I like his overs, but I'm not sure I'm going to get there in DFS. That's just a pretty high price. Jermaine Burton, very talented receiver at 4.7K, but he's been dealing with a groin issue. Hasn't really had much usage when he has been on the field. So, I don't know. He could blow up. He has a good matchup, in my opinion. but it's a total dart throw. Loudon McConkey, 4.1K, walk on, going to get some usage, but again, the volume's just not there for this passing offense. As far as the running back room, it's a total fade for me. They like to divvy up carries. I think James Cook's actually been their most reliable guy over the second half of the season, but Alabama has a very good defensive front. Not a great secondary, very good defensive front. They have Will Anderson out there, destroyer of worlds, amongst others. So I can't get there. Not great usage and not a great matchup. All right, Bryce Young at 8.5K could win the Heisman, especially if he has a good game here. So incentivized. Obviously has a very tough matchup. Going to get sacked a few times. He likes to run around, kind of crazy in the pocket, but it's worked. It's looked good. I'm skeptical that's going to work that well against Georgia, how he moves in the pocket, but it looks fantastic at points over the last couple of games. I'll give him that. At 8.5K, I mean, listen, they're probably going to be playing from behind. They're probably going to get some decent volume if playing from behind, because we'll just go right to it, because their rushing attack's not going to do nothing against Georgia. They're just going to do absolutely nothing. Brian Robinson, so they haven't been able to run the ball all year, and now Brian Robinson, their bell cow back, is injured, may not play. I don't think we're going to hear until warm-ups would be my speculation. I think he's probably going to be a game-time decision. He left injured last week against Auburn, didn't return. He did leave late. That leaves Trey Sanders as the number one guy at 6.1K, but that's too expensive against Georgia, in my opinion. You're probably relying on some good receptions, which he could get out of the backfield if Robinson doesn't play, but I still think that's too expensive. So anyway, Bryce Young's going to throw the ball out at 8.5K. I guess Georgia's more beatable in the secondary than they are up front because, of course, up front they're amazing. But, I mean, I would much rather play Crum. Jameson Williams, 8.K, was ejected for targeting last week. That was in the first half, so he'll be back for this one. At 8K, that's way too expensive against Georgia, in my opinion. I do still like his over on PrizePicks. It started the week in the low 60s. I think it's up to the higher 60s. I've played a little bit of that, and the higher 60s is where I got it. He's been phenomenal at 8K. John Mechie at 7.2K plays over 5.5 on PrizePicks. As far as DK goes, that's just too high of a price against Georgia for me. The usage has really ramped up over the second half of the season. 11 catches, 9 catches, 6 catches, 10 catches, 13 catches. The catches have been there. If you're playing cash, I think you could go to Mechie, but there's some better options out there, like I'm saying, with some better matchups, but I think he's fine. Anyone behind them has just been really inconsistent. Jalil Billingsley at 3.3K. Could always have a big game out of nowhere, but you never know what to expect. Christian Leary is a guy at 3.2K if you really need a punt. I know it sounds crazy. He's done nothing all year, but they did line him up in the backfield a little bit if you were watching last week. They didn't really give him the ball, but he was back there, and especially if Brian Robinson's out, I think Leary will be back there, especially if they're playing from behind, which I expect, which the odds makers expect. He could get some usage out of the backfield. It's a dart throw, but totally seems possible. All right, Houston, Cincinnati. Houston, 10.5 point underdogs. Over-under is 53.5. Let me get some coffee. We're back. So yeah, Houston has a good defense. They're allowing only 4.7 yards per play. Cincinnati's allowing only 4.3 yards per play. What I will say about Houston, while I kind of still like them versus the points because Cincinnati's been a little inconsistent, I just haven't trusted Houston all year. I don't really want to trust them now. They've had an embarrassing schedule. ESPN's FPI gives them the number 129 strength of schedule. And yeah, it's been really easy. They've really faltered at every task they've ever had under Dana Holgorsen. And now that they had an easy schedule, of course they're going to win 11 games. Like they should win 11 games. So I don't know. Their one test all year long was against SMU, and that game was headed to overtime, but they got a kick return touchdown right before the game ended to beat them by one score. They played ECU in what was kind of a test, and they were outgained by ECU, but still managed to win that game. So not impressed with Houston at all. That being said, I think they do have a pretty solid defense, and they have an okay offense. And Cincinnati has an immense amount of pressure on them this game, immense amount of pressure. If they don't win this game, it's probably group of five's just probably never getting in the playoffs at this point. So they're ranked number 4. If they win, they're probably in. This is a lot of pressure. Anyway, over-under's at 53.5. Yeah, and why Cincinnati hasn't been very impressive overall. They're still averaging 2.5 yards per play more than their opponents, which is good. Clayton Tune at 7.1K, extremely tough matchup. He runs a little bit. If they're playing from behind, I guess he could get you 20 points, right? Everybody in that 7K range this week, I'm like not thrilled about any of them. I think if you're going to play in that range, just play Rocky Lombardi. Probably he has by far the highest upside in tournaments. Yeah, Sauce Gardner, Kobe Bryant, absolute studs on the other side of the football. It looks like they both play out wide, at least according to what I'm checking. And then Nathaniel Dell plays mostly in the slot. He moves around. So it looks like Dell may not be matched up with those guys. Kind of curious to see how that one plays out. Dell's their clear-cut number one option. He's not a lock to get you 20 points, but if they're playing from behind, he's a little bit boomer bust. I'd like to see a little bit more targets than I'm seeing to consider him safe at 7K. I think he'd probably go elsewhere at that range. Other than that, I don't really see how you play a secondary option in a tough matchup. Running back, Alton McCaskill, amazing freshman, very fast, big guy. He's going to be a stud. He's been awesome this year. 6.3K, 10.5 point underdogs. Doesn't really seem like a great game environment. But at 6.3K, if you really want to get there, probably going to be low ownership. All right, Desmond Ridder at 9K. I'm not super interested this week. Like I said, it's actually a decently tough matchup. They could still score 40 points against Houston. Nobody would be surprised, let's be honest. They're on paper, they're the vastly superior team. But 9K, there are better options on this slate, in my opinion. He does have dual threat rushing ability that keeps him somewhat safe from the floor, but he's about as hit or miss as you can get as a quarterback. Like, he misses wide open throws all the time. He throws interceptions, but sometimes he goes out there and drops a 40 burger. Again, I'm not going to act like I have a crystal ball. He's volatile. Play him if you want. I'll probably have some, but not a lot. If I'm playing 150, obviously I'll have some, but not one of my higher owned guys this week for sure. We don't play Cincinnati wide receivers. Alec Pierce has been by far their number one guy, but not sure I can get there this week. He's okay. Their tight ends, Leonard Taylor at 3.5K, Josh Wiley at 3.3K. If you're going to play anybody, I could see them as lineup fillers. Wiley has been, I can't get him right. I played him a lot earlier in the year, and he was a total dud week after week. And then he got 22 points, 23 points when I didn't play him. Probably went back to him at Tulsa for all I can remember at one point. Like, this guy is super hit or miss. As likely to get you 0 points as he is 15. So, but at 3.3K, that still seems like a cheap price to me. Jerome Ford at 7.1K. Probably a lot of people are going to say Jerome Ford is underpriced this week. I do agree that he's underpriced. Doesn't mean I'm going to have a ton of him. I'm not really sure. Not really sure yet, but he is underpriced. They're 10.5 point favorites. They're supposed to win this game by a lot. Their rushing attack just hasn't looked great, especially on the offensive line. And again, Houston's defense is supposed to be good. Sharman's soft schedule. I think Jerome Ford is definitely in play. Definitely in play. That price point is way too cheap. I think he's probably fine in any format. He's one of those running backs that really, he needs to break long runs to really get you there in DFS. And he could break some long runs, but if he doesn't, you see like 2 weeks in a row, he has 20 carries for 83 yards. Their line just isn't great. It's not a home run option, but the price is not right. All right, Pitt versus Wake. This is the other game you're going to have massive ownership in. Over-unders at 72.5. Pitt is a 3-point favorite. I think that's fair. I think this game probably goes over because it seems like pretty much every Wake game goes over unless they're playing a quarterback with a broken wrist like they were last week. Sorry if you played Jerkovic. I played a ton of him. Stupid move. But yeah, this one, I mean, Wake's D is just straight up bad. They're allowing 6 yards per play. They've given up 45 points or more in 4 of their last 6 games. I think Pitt's a great option. Kenny Pickett's top 5 in the country in passing yards. Second in the country in passing touchdowns. What is there not to like? Really, if you can afford him, what is there not to like? Going to be pretty much impossible. I don't want to say impossible because there's some cheaper running backs I mentioned. To play Jordan Addison, I guess maybe if you play Brookshire, you can afford him. But Jordan Addison, most receiving touchdowns in the entire country with 17. That's 4 more than the next closest guy. He's a monster. 9.3K, great matchup. Behind them, Tasir Mack. Seems like he's questionable every week and then never plays. So if he does play, he's good at 4.6K, but I'm assuming he's not at this point. Jared Wade continues to be underpriced at 4.4K. He's put up a few duds lately, so that's probably why he still remains underpriced. But he's the secondary option at this point for this team, and great matchup. They throw the ball a ton. Jared Wayne at 4.4K. It's hard not to have him in your lineups. Lucas Kroll, tight end, 3.9K. Also hard not to have him in your lineups. Probably touchdown reliant, but he sees a decent amount of usage behind them. Gavin Bartholomew, another tight end. He's a little bit more hit or miss. This kid looks good. I like this kid. But he's a little bit more hit or miss. He's more likely to get you a dud. He's been better over his last couple of weeks, but he could get you 5 points, right? He had 5 receptions last week, but that's really out of the norm for him. 3.7K, if you need a price saver, I think Kroll and Bartholomew are both fine. I think Bartholomew, probably more of a GPP guy. Kroll, you can play anywhere. Running back room, yeah, if Ben and Canada plays at 5.7K, probably be in the player pool, but I'm not going to be super ecstatic about it. I'm kind of hoping he's ruled out, not from a viewership standpoint or anything like that, just from a DFS standpoint, because they really divvy up the carries between him, Hammond, and Davis. If he's out, that clears it up a little bit, and it allows me to pay down at running back. I think Hammond and Davis would become okay options, because, again, I think Wake sucks defensively. I think they're awful defensively. I think Pitt's going to score a lot of points, and these running backs could get a lot of points. I like Hammond there more. I think he has more touchdown upside. Davis just looks really small to me, but they still keep giving him the ball for some reason, so he could get some points against Wake, because you give anybody the ball against Wake, they're going to get some points, most likely. But yeah, if a Benny Canada's ruled out, I'm definitely going to have some Hammond. While I never play Pitt running backs for the most part. It's just a great matchup. All right, coming back on the other side, yeah, Sam Hartman, 9th in the country in passing yards, 9th in the country in passing touchdowns, and he runs the ball a little bit. He's a monster at 9.5K. I don't really have one over the other. I would prefer with Hartman and Pickett. I think you could play them both. They're both fantastic. They've both been studs. Pitt's defense really good on the defensive line, so they could sack Hartman a little bit here, which would hurt. I'm not going to play any Wake running backs for that reason, but their secondary is not great. Pitt's secondary is not great. I will say that. They are beatable in the secondary. So yeah, A.T. Perry's the top guy, 7.7K. Can't say too many bad things about him. That price is a little tough to get to. Jakari Roberson at 6.5K. He's too cheap. At points this year, he's just been too cheap. He was injured in the NC State game, brings down his stat line a little bit. That's probably helping with his price range. He's a 1,000-yard wide receiver. He's a little bit more safer, sees a little bit more targets in the short yardage areas, but A.T. Perry's been a monster, has more GPP upside. I think they're both fine. Roberson price adjusted. Probably I prefer a little bit. Anyone behind them, Taylor Morin at 4K in this matchup, I wouldn't tell you no. Dalton Stewart at 3.6K, I wouldn't tell you no. But they've been super, super, super inconsistent, as has Ben Williams. I thought Williams was going to step up and be the guy, but hasn't gotten anything in the last couple of weeks. So I guess you could dart throw any one of those guys and hope for the best, but I'm not really seeing many clear signs to point to who that is. Yeah, running backs, like I said, probably not going to play him. Beal Smith came back last week. I wouldn't play him against Wake. Justice Ellison at 4.4K. I don't really think I could get there. He didn't suit up. That means Christian Turner and Quentin Cooley are going to be getting the carries. I played Quentin Cooley a lot last week because this kid had an amazing high school career. Go look at his high school career in North Carolina. And this is a good rushing team. And they were going to score a lot of points last week, but he just couldn't get in the end zone. Got 14 carries. So not sure he's going to get in the end zone against Pitt if you really need a pay down option. I guess you could do worse. All right, Michigan, Iowa, yuck. I'll be quick on this one. Over-under's 43.5. Tells you about all you need to know. Cade McNamara. Don't know why you'd play him. Sure, you could get lucky at 5.7K. You really need saving. Sure, go ahead and play him. We don't play Michigan wide receivers. I don't really see a reason why that would change here. Cornelius Johnson's going to be their top guy at 4.5K. I guess that's cheap for a top option if you want to use that logic. AJ Henning got in the end zone last week. Looks like a pretty good player. No usage whatsoever to speak of. Baldwin, I guess you could say he's too cheap, but these are just tough matchups for all these guys. Eric All, the tight end at 3.6K. Whatever. Running back room. Hassan Haskins has been an absolute monster. He's really taken over since Blake Corum's been hurt. Now, Blake Corum did come back last week. Did not look 100%. He did have a breakaway run where if it looked like if he was at 100%, he would have gotten the touchdown, but he didn't because he did not look 100%. I think Blake Corum's too cheap at 4.3K. This is obviously a tough matchup against Iowa, but at this point, we just have to recognize that Michigan has a good offense. Okay? They've been scoring the ball all year long. At this point, we have to realize. Now, they get a tough matchup, but basically how I think this game's going to go. I don't think Iowa's good at all. I think they have a terrible offense. I don't think they're going to be able to keep the ball. I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball. So Michigan's going to have the ball a lot. They're not going to play at a high tempo. They're just going to kind of sit on the ball, get a lead. It's going to be 17-3. They're just going to kind of sit on it. And I think that kind of plays towards these running backs. I think either one get some decent usage. Maybe if they're trying to get Corum back up to full speed, maybe they give him a little more usage at 4.3K. Haskins, it's really hard for me to get to that price at 8.7K, but he had 5 touchdowns last week, folks. He's been remarkably consistent. Probably in cash games you could get there too. Is he going to get 5 more touchdowns in this one? Probably not, but like I said, the game script could set up that way. So don't have a strong feeling either way, but I won't have a ton of these guys. Just if I could afford Haskins, I would have more, but that's his price is where it should be. Yeah, don't play Spencer Petras. Don't do that to yourself. This is going to start. He's been bad. He'll probably be bad here. Wide receivers. Don't play their wide receivers. I guess. So you might need a lineup filler down here in this range. I said one lineup. I think I had Laporta in it. I don't really love Laporta, but he's one of the better tight ends in the country. We know it's Iowa. We know they like to throw their tight ends. I think they're going to be playing from behind at 3.6K. I just think he's too cheap. Arlen Bruce probably has the most breakout potential at 3.4K, but the usage is not there. And that's about all I could say. Running backs, Tyler Goodson is a very, very, very talented football player playing for a very, very, very bad offense. Offensive line has really struggled at 6K. He has gone over 100 yards in each of his last 2 games, which is nice to see. Kind of throw out that Northwestern game because Northwestern doesn't really have a football team. I don't really know what they're doing out there. So you can't really rely on those stats. But Nebraska has a good team, and he had 156 yards last week. I think he's okay. Goodson, I think that price is fair. I think it's a little cheap because he's a very good running back, but it's a tough matchup against Michigan. Okay, that's it. That's the slate. As far as where I'm looking, I think I kind of already told you where I'm looking. There's some obvious plays. Probably some high-owned guys will be on there. I think you kind of have to nail your secondary options to be successful on the slate. But there's some decent ones there. All right, let me see if I have any PrizePicks up to give out. PrizePicks, if you're not using PrizePicks, go ahead and use it now. Link is in the description. It is, I'm not bullshitting you guys. I'm not saying this because they're a sponsor of the show. I think it's the best fantasy sports website right now. I think it's the best one to make money off of, especially if you are into college. The college offerings are fantastic. Absolutely crushing it this year. I'm not kidding. This has been the go-to this year. This has been the go-to. So you get $100 instant deposit match. First-time depositors. If you're not signed up, please sign up. It's up to $100. You could give $25, get $25 back. $50, get $50 back. Use promo code Yonke, all caps, YONKE. That's my last name. Or just use the link in the description. All right, let me see what I have going to this week. All right, so I played Bailey Zappi's overs because they opened at 340 something. I grabbed them at 349.5. So I played a ton of that, locked it into everything I could. It's risen a little bit. I grabbed it at 365 yesterday. Again, it's at 369 right now. I believe I would still play that, probably up to 375. He probably goes over 400. Passing yards, he's first in the country in passing yards in a country mile. So I like Bailey Zappi. I also like his over 29.5 pass completions. He's gotten over that in pretty much every game this year except for a couple. I think John Mechie goes over 5.5 receptions. I think Noah Whittington, Western Kentucky running back, probably gets over 6.5 fantasy points. They throw him the ball a decent amount out of the backfield, so reception-wise, he's going to get close anyway. Seeing more rushing usage lately. I think Sincere McCormick, UTSA running back, probably gets over 17.5 fantasy points. I think Brendan Presley, Oklahoma State, gets over 7.5 fantasy points. Brock Bowers, over 44.5 receiving yards. Trayvon Rudolph, pretty much any over, but I think his 5 receptions is the way I'm looking. That's the way I played it so far. And then Jamison Williams, I think he gets over 69 receiving yards, and he probably gets over 14.5 fantasy points too, but I don't know if I want to get too crazy. Playing too many Bama guys against Georgia, but I think locking one of those guys up would be fine. So yeah, once again, use promo code Yonke, all caps, YONKE. Other than that, thanks for listening. Thank you guys a lot for listening to the show. Like I said, it's a one-man band here. I can't get it out every week, try my hardest, but there are hours and hours and hours of research that goes into this, and I got a lot going on as well. So best of luck this week. I don't know how much we'll have going on for bowl season. I'm sure we'll have something here or there. If not, just a PrizePicks video or something to show. But yeah, we'll be around. It's not like we're going to take all off season off. If we don't do anything for bowl season, which again, we will. If not, we'll be on Twitter, at YonkerCFB. We'll be posting some stuff there. But yeah, thanks for supporting. This is pretty much the end of year 2. I just started doing this myself last year. I'm glad if you found the information useful. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. It goes a long way. And other than that, we're out. Good luck this week.